Okay, so this is part 2 of how to connect the Moss sysadmin with Cloud Server instance and run up a Bedrock WordPress installation. So in the previous video, we set up the Cloud Server and we connected it to the Moss sysadmin. So that process is completed now, and I'll just start from the top. We go into the workspace here, and we've got the server that's connected through into here. We don't have any sites set up yet, of course. One thing to mention here, it doesn't have anything on memory, disk, and CPU. If you want to get that, you can turn it on, but it's going to cost you a bit extra. So it is worth it to get it, I suppose, but you can always go into your server and do a HTOP and check out how it's performing anyway. So it's an extra add-on if you want to see a visual dashboard up here. So what I want to do is when I want to go in there, I just want to check that we've got SSH entry as we just set up before. So we click on it and we're going to go into the SSH link here, click on that, and you can see here Moss is set up as a sudo user. So before, when we ran the curl script that was generated by linking up the Moss with the UpCloud server instance, it asked us, which user we should use to basically give permission to Moss to connect, and we gave it the root user at the server IP address. So you don't do root at this anymore. You could actually still log in as root, but it's set up a new sudo user for us based on that, using the SSH key pair that we set up before. So we're going to go in and we're going to copy this SSH key, and we're just going to log into the server that we've created and linked with Moss. So I'm just going to open up here and paste it, and there we go. It goes in, it's logged us in, so that's great. So I'm just going to clear the screen and just do a list of the files that's in there. So you can see here it's all set up, but we haven't got anything really in there because we haven't even created any websites in there yet. So we're not hosting anything. We've actually connected it. We can access it through Moss. We know that we've created a user in Moss to access our website. Our server, which we've called Moss-Bedrock WP. All right, and you can see it up here, Moss-Bedrock WP. So what we need to do is we want to go to our local machine, and we're going to use Composer to initiate a new Bedrock repo, a local repo on our machine. And so this presumes that you've already got Composer installed. If you don't, pause the video and you should go install it now. So I'm just going to go in here, of course, and what I want to do is I just want to cd into my documents. I don't think I'm there actually. I've got to exit out of our remote machine. So I just want to cd into documents. Maybe I'm not in there yet. Cd documents. Yep, there you go. So just want to go ahead and look inside of there. That's okay. So what we want to do is we'll just use Composer to start up a new instance, to create a new instance, and we're going to do a git initialize, and then we're also going to link it up with a git repo. I mean, you could use GitHub, you could use GitLab and a few others. Moss has some integrations with Bitbucket, with GitLab and GitHub, and I think you can also set up your own as well if you obviously know how to set that up. I'm going to use it with GitHub because that's what I use. So I'm just going to go ahead and do the installation for that. Terminal window, and run this Composer command to create a new project. Actually, before we do that, we might just go ahead and make a directory first before we go ahead and do that. So doesn't really matter. We can just do this. We're just going to call it Bedrock. If we didn't really want to have this, we can rename it later. So we go ahead and create it. It's going to take a while for it to spin up and pull down all the files and folders that it needs. Okay, so it successfully pulled down what we need with Composer from the Bedrock repo. So I've gone ahead and created this remote repo. It's pretty easy what we need to do now. I'll just go in and make sure we're in that Bedrock installation and run git init. And that's initialized it, and I'm not going to do the readme. We're just going to copy through and do these things. First of all, I'll do a git add everything and do the git commit, and then set up the remote local connection. Do that here and then we'll do the push up to the master remote branch. And so that should be pretty short, there's not too many files, and when it's done it'll let us know. So that's all done now. So what we should do is if we go into our remote repo here and just do a refresh on it, we can see all those things have just been pushed up there. So that's great. We've set up the Git repo in GitHub or GitLab or whatever you use, and we've set up the local Git environment and connected both of them together. We want to go ahead and create the site in Moss and link up that Git remote to it so we can deploy with it, because it's got all our Bedrock components that we need to build our WordPress website within it. And that's how we manage the actual files in the WordPress and Bedrock installation. So we go ahead into the workflow for this one, workspace, sorry, and go into the Moss Bedrock WP one, and we create a new site in here. Now we click WordPress. There's lots of other ones we can choose here, very popular PHP frameworks and Node and HTML, just good for static or a flat file CMS. And we'll click on WordPress, but do not click on the install button down here. You don't want to do that because that'll actually install a normal kind of WordPress installation, which is not what we're doing here. We're going for the Bedrock version of WordPress. So we click on that. You can choose your version of PHP, and that's really another great feature for Moss, is that it allows you to select the PHP version that you want for every single web application that you build on it. And you don't need to set it all up for one workspace or whatever. You can do whatever you want with it, which is a challenging thing with some of the other system administrations or cPanels, of course. So it's great to have this feature in here. So I've already created a user called admin Bedrock, but what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go and create a new one in here, and I'll call it just basically, we'll call it Bedrock, make it really easy, something like that. So create it. And what you would normally do is, if you've already set up your domain name and registered it, you'd put it inside of here. And this is all, of course, if you've got your name servers and A records and DNS entries all set up. So in this video, we haven't done that. We've just spun up a box and we haven't connected anything to it with the DNS. So there's a really useful feature that we have that Bedrock can generate a test domain for you. So you copy that in and you put it into here, and that's set up for you. And I'm just going to leave the site name as Bedrock because it pretty much borrowed it from my username here. It's doing something by default that really I can't complain with, because it kind of keeps things quite easy to do. So it's smart that it has that intelligence to do that for you. Another great feature, it's got Let's Encrypt, very easy to apply. You can just click on it, custom, that you can set up your own SSL, which is great. A few of the free sysadmins or web panels that I've used before, the Let's Encrypt is with it, but it's a bit of a complicated setup, especially when I came from Vesta CP. Great they had it, but the renewals didn't really work, and I had kind of issues renewing it manually, all kinds of things. So it's really good to see a workflow here for it. So we click on that one here, and we can create a new database basically in here. I've already created this one before, so I won't use it. What I'll do is I'll create a new connection, show you how easy that is. So this is just for another test instance that we set up before. So I'm just going to create a new one in here, and I'll call it, Bedrock DB test, something like that. And it's given us the name as well as the database name and the username. Again, it's something that, it's pretty convenient to do that. I mean, if you want to set it up differently, you can, but I think it's a nice feature to kind of do that for you. You can set up a random generated password. Another great feature of Moss is that you don't need to go and copy this password down and keep it somewhere safe in case you lose it, because you can always copy it from the sysadmin panel inside of Moss later on. So you don't even need to remember it. It's fantastic. So we hit create, and that's going to basically get ready to set us up a database. It hasn't actually set it up yet. So once I set everything up and create the site, it's going to go ahead and knock through all these configurations and spin up that site for us on our server that we've integrated into Moss. So we can do a redirect on the www here, which is awesome. So I'll click on that. You can install Postfix if you want to use a mail server on your domain. That's something that we're not actually going to do here. show advanced options. You can choose whether you want to have a complete Nginx environment, like a LAMP stack, or whether you want to keep with this one. I keep with this one as a default because I still kind of like playing around with .htaccess files and whatnot. So very important that we go into here, not so much for this one, but we need to set up the root directory as web. That's really important for it to work with Bedrock. If we set it up as the public one default, it's not going to really work well for us. So we go ahead and do that. And if we hit create, that all should work. And it probably take us back to the top and shows us a green little success message. Now, in the meantime, it's going to start working through what we told it to do and build the site and set up the database and connect it and everything else. So if I close this and I go up into the log file up here, we can see it's running, it's creating the site, it's doing all that. It's got a history, which is pretty good. You can go through and you can see all the other events that you've done. So you can, especially in a team environment, you can kind of track what everyone else is doing and even yourself as well. So I've gone in here and I've created quite a few sites, servers and databases and stuff like that. So that's great. So what we're going to do is, in the meantime, whilst we're waiting for that to happen, we can go in and we can link up our GitHub account into the site workflow. So therefore, when we, working through local and getting to GitHub, we're pushing all our changes into GitHub, and then GitHub can push them into our website using this deployment integration. And you can even set up auto deploy. So as soon as you're pushing from your local into your master branch remote, it's going to set up to push it into your site automatically, which is a really good feature. So I'm just going to click on it here and go into the, where are we? Deployments, all right? And then we're going to add the GitHub repository. So we click on the add button here, and we've got a host of popular Git repository systems that you can add. I'm going to use the GitHub. I did sign up with Moss with my GitHub OAuth account, so it's pretty handy that I did that, because if I click on here, it already knows that it's linked up with my access. So I can go in there and select the GitHub user, CoolWebs, and then I can see that demo Bedrock is the repo that I created. I can select that. It's already gone to the master branch. That's the one that we want to use, and we can click add the Git repository. So that's going to set that up as well, which is fantastic. And so that's added it to the queue of things to do. We've actually already had the site happen, so it's created the site. Now it's setting up that deployment workflow as well. So what we also want to do is we want to actually create an environment. So we want to set up a persistent path for the .env file. So what this is something that's persisting and it's not in the Git repo, because we don't want the .env file is kind of like the replacement for what the WP config file is in WordPress. It keeps all our connections like our database and our salt keys and securities and all the settings for our WordPress setup. And it's in that .env file, and we can make it push to a staging site, a production site, or another different type of site in a workflow, which is great, but we don't want it into our remote repository. It's a security issue. So we put it in as a persistent path that will sit there and not be affected by our Git deployment workflow. So we go ahead, I'm just going to move the screen a bit and create a new path. And so we set it up as a file, of course, not a folder, and put .env in it. So we're going to access it in the server via the shared pathway here. And so for pretty much that site, it's going to use these .env details. And we're going to set that up later on. So I'm going to click add for that, and add the persistent path. And this step, can't stress how important it is, because I have missed this a few times and it didn't work out for me. If you don't do this, you're going to have issues getting it set up for yourself. So thanks for watching this video. It's been really fun getting this rolling. What we're going to do in the next video of the series, we're just going to go through and finally run the deployment workflow and put in a pre-install script of Composer, because the one thing we're missing is that we've got to add some extra configurations for it to work on the live server. And once that's done, we should be able to get the WordPress site up and running via the Bedrock framework. Can't wait to check it out.